Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. Time for a market update. We will be looking at the price of Bitcoin. The action here continues to narrow and trade sideways, setting up for a potentially big move going into Q4. I'm also going to look at some of the alts, the big picture. The question that remains, are the altcoins dead? Bitcoin dominance hit 70%, and many of those alts just continue to drift lower. There are a few names starting to pop off the lows. We'll look at a few of those, but I just want to cover the big picture on some of those alts, and we will certainly deep dive this Bitcoin chart. Before we do, let's take a look at some news. As we know, Binance closed its doors to U.S. traders over the summer. Really, it's official as of today, September 12th. But they did announce yesterday that they're going to be opening the Binance US registration here next week. It will be limited. There's going to only be 6 cryptos that you can trade: Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, and Tether. Not too excited, to be honest with you. It's going to be limited. I don't expect it's going to have the full suite of coins, of crap coins that you can trade on the normal Binance site, but we'll see how that starts to impact the price of the BNB token. But some big news, just because of Binance generally has a lot of influence in the crypto trading space so far. So that's the big news here on the Binance. Let's take a look at the total market cap here, trading at $260 billion. BTC dominance 70%. And as I mentioned in the last live stream, when you really start to factor in other things beyond just market cap, trading volume and some of the supply and all of that stuff, and kind of account for the adjustments there, one could argue that the BTC dominance is much higher than 70%. And the big question around alts, are they dead? I mean, obviously Bitcoin remains the king crypto by far. If you look at the total market cap for Bitcoin, $185 billion almost. Number 2 is a distant second at $19 billion here for Ethereum, and XRP $11 billion. And there's some argument there to be made around, should it even really be valued that high when you factor in some of the supply? And there's a bunch of other things. You got Tether, which is a stable coin. You've got Binance Coin. You've got a lot of exchange tokens that have recently come to the top of the top 50 list here. Leo, Huobi, right? And it's just, you got to take this list with a little bit of a grain of salt, if you will. The list is not necessarily these are the most valuable cryptos. They are based on this calculation that they're doing, but if one to look at other measures, volume, trading, usability, all that other stuff, there's certainly some other ways to look at it. But nonetheless, Bitcoin remains number 1 king crypto, slowly turning everyone into a Bitcoin maximalist here as it continues to regain its dominance. But are the altcoins dead? They are not dead. We will see some alt rallies. It will always be a different crop of names. If you go back into the history of the total crypto market cap, I mean, you go back 2 years ago, the top 20, top 30 list was way different than it is today. Even looking back at last year's top 20, top 30 list, it certainly changes. Now, there are some names that have persisted here at the top ranks: Bitcoin, Litecoin, EOS, Monero, some of the newcomers here, Cardano, Dash. I mean, there's been some other names that have certainly persisted here near the top of the list. But even going down the list, I mean, there's a lot of questionable coins here, even in the top 50, top 100 list. I mean, you got Bitcoin Diamond here sitting at 47, and just on, just kind of looking at some of these tokens, and it just really paints a picture of the limited number of really high quality cryptos that are out there. And a lot of these really do have good ambitions. They're trying to solve interesting problems, but are they going to be the ones that do it? Are they going to have that traction, that long-term market traction? Are they going to be the killer app that really launches crypto mainstream? It's yet to be seen. A lot of these, as we know, will not make it over the long term, and you just got to treat them like startups. I mean, a lot of them, for whatever reason, they may have good teams, they may have good vision, but for whatever reason, may not last over the long haul. So just something to note. So looking at the charts here, I'm going to start with the BTC. This is the daily chart view of Bitcoin, and as we can see, it continues to narrow, trade in a very tight range. Two major points that I'm watching. Of course, this trend line, which we know trend lines are subjective, but there's a general overhead resistance downtrend line that has continued to act as a level of resistance, and we've seen pullbacks from that. Here we are getting a little bit of a higher low on this daily chart after about a week of pullback, sideways action. Will it test it again? The key level to be watching here on the trend line area is around that $10,700 mark, but really the key resistance level that I'm going to be watching is basically that 11K level, that psychological round number. That's going to be a significant level to be watching on the upside. So if price can start to hold above that, maybe test that trend line and get going, that could be a significant breakout above this downtrend line. On the downside, around that $9,300 level is really that key level of support we've seen on those extreme wick downs. Buyers continue to step in there, and then of course below that is that 9,000 round number. So really you've got a level of support here in this zone around that 9K level up to around the lower 9K range, and that's really the key area to be watching here. It's been a level of consolidation ever since we saw that big run up that culminated in almost a parabolic move into that 14K level before we started seeing this consolidation here over the last several months, which is not surprising. After a very strong first and second quarter of 2019, it needed a breather. It needed some time to digest this. We'll take a look at the weekly chart here, but it was just well extended, and so far the consolidation has held up. Will it continue to hold up above 9K? We're going to find out pretty soon here, one way or the other. I expect to see a breakout of this range here as we head into Q4. So we've got October, which really starts as this consolidation hits a little bit of an apex, and generally they don't make it all the way to the end. You'll see a breakout one way or the other right around here. So I'm expecting kind of in this September timeframe we'll start to see some movement out of this range. It's going to be interesting to see which way it goes. But going to that weekly chart here, as we zoom in here, we can see just how strong of a move this was over that Q2 time frame. I mean, just almost parabolic on this weekly chart. Very few red weeks along the way before culminating in that very high volume reversal week, which hit around that 14K. And since then, it's just kind of been in pullback mode. But you can see that the moving averages have finally caught up here. So we're seeing some support starting to form as this catches up, letting the indicators cool off. You've seen the volume die down here over the last several weeks. The RSI has cooled off. The MACD is back in the red. And so certainly has reset that weekly chart. Now it could go either way, and there's certainly an argument to be made for, hey, on the daily chart this looks like a big descending triangle. I won't argue with that, but in the big picture, even if it undercuts this 9K support, which personally I'm kind of hoping it does, because I think that'd be a nice little bit of a shakeout from this broader pattern that we see forming here. We've had this pullback, we've had this rally, a lower high on the weekly chart. I'd like to see personally an undercut of this level, shake out some of the last of the longs there, and then take off from there. That'd be my ideal scenario. It'd be a little bit more bullish here, but we can, it's all going to depend on if we do get that shakeout, does the support come in? On the downside, if it does undercut, there's a pretty big range of support here. The lowest I'd like to see it hit is 7,700 or so on a shakeout. I don't expect it to get that low, but hey, this is crypto. Anything can happen. And so on the way up, if we start to see that 11K taken out, let's go back to that daily chart here. That 11K is kind of first resistance. It'll take out the trend line, take out some near-term horizontal resistance here. Let me zoom in for us. But the big number to be watching is right here, this last major swing high around that 12.1, 12.2 level. Above that, there really isn't a lot of resistance on the way up. I mean, we've got a very brief period of time where price has traded above that, and if you look at the all-time highs back in December of 2017, the amount of time spent over that 12K mark is very limited, and so there's just not a lot of resistance, not a lot of trading volume up at those levels. And so above that 12K, things could really start moving, and I would expect we start to see new relative highs very quickly after that. So just something to be watching here on the way up if price starts to take that level out. Taking a look at the broader altcoin picture, right? The big question is, are the altcoins dead? And certainly the sentiment that I'm getting a read for out there is very negative, very bearish towards the alts. You're starting to see a lot of posts about they're done, ETH is officially done, and some of these other big projects are never going to come to fruition. And it's getting a little bit of an extreme level of bearishness in terms of some of the alts. Certainly a lot of the enthusiasm and excitement around them has absolutely died off. But what I want to point out is this big picture chart. So we're going to look at the daily chart of just a handful of these just to kind of get a quick feel. But you can see the broader trend is absolutely downward. The moving averages are still trending lower. Price is generally trading below these shorter term moving averages. If I would add on a longer term moving average, 100-day or 200-day, well below those. So there's no doubt that the trend is very bearish for these alts versus Bitcoin. We know that Bitcoin dominance has risen to 70%. But you are starting to see a little bit of a divergence show up here on some of these alts on the RSI. And so what I mean by that is, as these prices have continued to make new lows or start trading sideways, you're starting to see the RSI not confirm. And same with the MACD histogram on a lot of these charts. So if we go to names like EOS, which has been one of the stronger ones off the lows here recently, you can see we've got a low here in June and July, another low here in August, and a new relative low here in the last couple of days. But you can see that the RSI and the MACD have not been confirming that. It's not an automatic buy signal, but what it does start to signify is, hey, maybe this selling momentum in the altcoin space, the broader momentum to the downside, is starting to slow down, which could translate into that BTC dominance pulling back some. That means the alts will begin to outperform Bitcoin. So definitely something to be watching here as these alts start to find a little bit of support here near term. We've not seen any level of confirmation yet. Prices are just now starting to bounce off of some near-term lows. We've seen that here before, which has generally been followed by a new lower low. And so what you want to start seeing is these rallies, a higher low start set, and then a trend change, which we make a new higher high on that daily chart. And that's what I'm looking out for. EOS is a good example of that. You're seeing this relatively high volume coming in. The pullback over the last several days has been on lighter volume, still holding above these moving averages. Cleared some near-term resistance from back here in early August. So what you want to see now is some follow-through on expanding volume as price continues higher. But we've yet to see that. It's mostly just been short-lived pumps. For example, you saw ICE icon here. Of course, this was on some news, but you're just seeing it drift lower. You saw ETC do something similar on the fork anticipation. After that, just kind of drifting lower. And so the moves have been very short-lived as of yet. Engine, for example, rallied right up to resistance and then has just been pulling back. So not a lot of confirmation out there yet, but in the big picture, when I started looking at these big charts of these prices just really collapsing and fully retracing here in the last month or so, there are some divergences starting to show up here on the higher time frames. So it's definitely something to make note of. Like I said, not an automatic buy signal, but I start paying attention when I start seeing these big charts, the sentiments hitting all-time lows on a lot of these alts, and some of them making all-time lows in prices versus Bitcoin. You know, it just tells me that start paying attention. Some of these may be due for a little bit more of a 2 or 3 day pump that we've seen here for the most part. But all around, the picture remains the same, right? The broader downtrend, for example, XRP, still very much on the way down. As I said, though, there are some divergences starting to show up. And you can go down the list, and it's pretty much all the same picture. These are just so highly correlated. They move in tandem. So for the most part, they're all going to be going down together. They're all going to be heading up together versus BTC. Some are outperforming others, more so than not, but for the most part, the trend generally is the same for most of these names. So definitely something to make note of here. ETH is one I generally watch as a little bit of a barometer for how the alts are doing versus Bitcoin, and it's still very much underperforming Bitcoin. Yeah, there's been a little bit of a rally here for a few days, but the big picture still very much underperforming Bitcoin. Bitcoin all around is the better place to be for now. And it's going to be interesting to see how these react when Bitcoin finally breaks out of this range. And what's really been the scenario here this year is Bitcoin rallies, alts get hit, Bitcoin pulls back, alts get hit. They just have not been able to find any sort of footing, but eventually that will change. We'll get back to a little bit of a swing or a period where alts are outperforming Bitcoin as Bitcoin moves higher. And that's generally what crypto traders enjoy seeing. Makes for the market to be a little bit more fun. You're seeing the Satoshi value increase. I think we'll get there again. Right now, we're just in a little bit of a consolidation period. Alts are absolutely in a bear trend versus Bitcoin, but things change as we know, so stay vigilant. Make sure you pay attention to some of those bigger signals, and as I always say, just one day at a time. I'm not going to get too excited about a 1 or 2, 3 day pump on some of these alts. I try not to FOMO. Yeah, on the short run, they make for some good tradable rallies, but from a long-term hold perspective, I'm still predominantly Bitcoin, and I haven't seen any sort of long-term buy signals for the alts yet. So until that happens, I'm going to just mostly stay with BTC on that front here. Looking at the alerts page here, not a whole lot. I'm just getting a lot of oversold long-term alerts, which we know there's been a few names on the move. KuCoin shares has been moving. Bitcoin, as we know, was moving here today. If we go to the automated watch list, it's pretty slim right now. Not a whole lot on the list here. Populous, Icon, I mean, just a lot of small crap coins. So for the most part, not a whole lot to do. Stay patient here. We're still in this consolidation mode, but I expect we'll begin to see some movement out of this range in the coming weeks. So that's going to do it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. I will have another live stream tomorrow to kind of wrap up the week, so look out for that. Until next time, take care, everyone.